Negative gearing and capital gains tax is back in the headlines as gaps emerge between the Prime Minister and Treasurer over what modelling was sought to tackle the issue last year. The Coalition has now accused the Prime Minister of lying. Joining us live is our Friday morning panel, National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie and the Independent MP Zali Steggall. Good morning to you both. So Zali, I mean, in the event of a Labor-held minority, the Teals could be kingmakers. So no doubt you'd have a lot of investors in your electorate. Do you want negative gearing and cuts to capital gains tax concessions on the table?
Well, certainly not when it comes to as a broad range. But what I think we need to be clear about, Pete, it was only a few weeks ago that everyone was talking about this. We have fiscal deficit for the next decade. We need fiscal repair. So we do need to have a tough conversation when it comes to tax reform. Now, we know there is, for example, $10 billion that goes to the fuel tax excise that goes to mining companies and transport. So I want to see that on the table. I want to see an increase to the petroleum resource rent tax on the table to make sure we get more revenue and we strengthen Australia's economy. I have polled and surveyed this around the electorate, and concern about the long-term viability of the economy is strong. So I do think everything will need to be on the table. I don't support any changes to capital gains exemptions when it comes to the family home or 1 to 2 investment properties. But beyond that, I think it does have to be on the table. We have to look at what is a fiscally responsible economy into the future that balances that intergenerational opportunity to get into a home. So young people cannot get into homes. We have to address that question.
So capital gains above 2 investment properties, that's what you'd be interested in cracking down on, just to be clear?
I am requesting costings of that from the Parliamentary Budget Office because we have to start having that conversation. We can't, on one hand, fund services and look at building for young Australians new homes and giving tax rebates and all of the things that everyone wants without putting something back into the pot, right? We know we are in fiscal deficit for the next 10 to 20 years. Many people beat their chest about this at the budget time, but then we get to this campaign situation and no one is prepared to stand up for the tough conversation of how are we going to grow Australia's economy.
Okay, and just one more before we go to Bridget. On negative gearing, did you want changes to that or leave as is?
Again, I think everything needs to be on the table. We need to look at what is working for the Australian economy, what is disproportionately costing the Australian economy and not growing it. So again, I know I'll have the attack headlines straight after this about, twisting anything I've said. But the reality is we have to talk about how are we going to deal with our fiscal deficit that is there for the long term. We need to start growing the Australian economy. It can be an innovation-driven economy, but we have to look at how our revenue base, and it can't just rely on the tax of people's work, taxing people from their work. We have to start looking at other things. All
right, I'm not twisting anything you said. There's your response in full there, Zali. Over to you, Bridget, for your response to all of that.
Well, you've just heard from Zali, it's just not just the Labor Party that has secret plans to get rid of negative gearing, to make significant changes to capital gains taxes. That is, the Teals and the Greens have made it very, very clear that they have got negative gearing and capital gains tax changes in their sights post-election. That is an incredibly disappointing approach, Zali, because we know negative gearing and property investors play a significant role in ensuring supply of housing right across the economy. And what you heard from Zali there again is her anti-mining, anti-resource industry rhetoric, which it's actually the resource industry that's supplying the significant windfalls to actually pay down a lot of that deficit and debt over time. And so if we keep attacking the resource industry, you will not be able to that fiscal discipline back into our budgets.
It's not paying down debt and deficit though, right? Because debt and deficit keeps blowing out.
Well, the surpluses that Jim Chalmers has been crowing about over this election campaign were as a result of the significant inputs from our resources industry. These are the industries that Zali wants to make less competitive on the global stage rather than more competitive. What we're interested in doing is ensuring our economy is more productive, is growing, and that means backing private business, private enterprise and small businesses to actually grow and expand, not the retraction that you're seeing at the moment, the withdrawal of investment overseas, and indeed 30,000 small businesses going bust under Labor and their policy approach. Okay. So that's the issue. If
I can just get a minute each, because I'm just getting short for time, but I want to bring this up because Julia brought up some staggering figures a short time ago that homeowners will be looking at $500 energy bills per quarter next year, and they will rise once those energy rebates are taken away. This is the problem with handouts, right? They're difficult to overturn. But at some point they need to be taken away, and ACOS I see is arguing that there needs to be more permanent rebates in place, but Zali, can these handouts keep on coming?
Well, I think the problem we have is the most vulnerable in our community on job seeker, youth allowance, the pension. Those areas have not significantly increased during this term. And so whilst they're meeting increased costs of living and higher energy prices, are not getting the assistance. So what I want to see when these rebates come to an end is more targeted approach of support for the most vulnerable, because at the moment those rebates are just applied, to the entire population.
So you're thinking
without
means
any
tested.
kind of means testing.
Right, okay.
So I think we need to get much more disciplined with public spending and helping the most vulnerable by keeping a much tighter rein on that budget and spending. But again, it's the investment into getting people into getting more rooftop solar, batteries. All those programs will help when it comes to energy consumption for households, because if they make more of their own, they buy less from the grid. And can I just pick up Bridget on her comment? We know the data is some of the large gas companies pay less in tax revenue than, for example, we get from beer excise around the country. So I think we have to be a little bit more truthful when it comes to who is genuinely contributing a high amount of revenue to the Australian coffers.
On those rebates, you might have a response to that, but on those rebates, should there be something more means tested next year, or at the end of this year, I should say, Bridget, when those rebates are taken away in less than a minute?
Well, I think, Pete, you're seeing cost of living crisis right around the country, and energy is our economy. It's not just household bills where this is being felt, but in all our businesses, which has flow and a cost to the cost of goods through the economy. So our plan to actually get more gas into the market quicker, we know will bring down prices of energy, not just for the household, but importantly for business as well, which will have flow-on impacts right throughout the economy on the price of goods. So that's our solution. We're going to deal with the problem rather than Band-Aids.
All right, we will have to leave it there. Hope you guys have a good and safe weekend before early voting starts next Tuesday. So appreciate your time.